IDF tanks have reportedly reached the outskirts of the Sabra neighborhood in Gaza City, and IDF strikes on the Hamas neighborhood of Khan Yunis are also advancing. Hamas is also busy executing several Gazan civilians accused of collaboration with Israel. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth about what is happening in Israel. Intelligence information released over the weekend indicates that the terror organization Hamas has returned to rebuilding tunnels, even in the areas where the IDF has already cleared in Gaza City. And meanwhile, tens of thousands of Israelis have already received a Tzav Shmone, an emergency call-up ahead of Operation Gideon Chariots B. While the IDF is already shifting positions and closing around Gaza City, also after the weekend, armored forces have already been entering the outskirts of Gaza City as part of preparations for a broad maneuver meant for now to pressure Hamas and to prompt the civilian evacuation. Prime Minister Netanyahu took a tour of Gaza in which he said, "We are at a stage of decision. I approved the IDF's plans to take control of the city." This announcement was accompanied by reports that IDF tanks have indeed advanced and are already in the outskirts of Gaza City. However, despite briefings in Israel and a freeze in the talks, the Prime Minister has not yet finally decided to reject the partial deal being offered by the mediators, which Hamas has already agreed to. The concrete proposal on the table is the one that would free 10 living hostages and the remains of 18 others who died in captivity by Hamas and bring a 2-month ceasefire. An Israeli source has confirmed that Hamas agreed to part of the conditions, including the release of security prisoners serving life sentences and the width of the IDF security perimeter. We'll bring you more details. And meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, they reported that Hamas security apparatuses executed 4 so-called collaborators, claiming that they gave Israel information that led to eliminations. And while all of this is going on, there was no break in the action on other fronts of Israel. Friday evening saw a strange ballistic missile attack from Yemen, leading to speculations that the Houthis may have upgraded their missiles, which might be good for Israel in a very odd way. But in any case, the Air Force is investigating the results of the failed interception and also looking at debris that were found and which might indicate the presence of a cluster sub-munitions similar to the weapons that Iran launched at Israel towards the end of the 12-day war in June. And in the northern arena, Lebanon, on the verge of the civil war that's going on there, as Hezbollah has decided to go down fighting. And closer to Jerusalem, where I am right now, in the last 24 hours, 90 wanted persons were arrested in sweeps of terrorist facilities throughout the territories, while weapons and other contraband were also seized. And finally, Iran's crisis is only getting worse, with widening electricity and water shortages amidst a heat wave that shows no signs of lifting up. But the regime has a plan. They're going to keep threatening Israel, declaring that they're ready to launch a crushing response if Israel will strike again. Large crowds gathered in several Iranian cities over the weekend to voice their lack of satisfaction with this plan, as hundreds of schools, universities, factories, and government offices remain closed because of this situation. While millions of citizens suffer, the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the army, and the police are still getting water and electricity supplies, but according to the intelligence assessments, the harsh situation will reach them as well very soon. So, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 688 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. We are on the front lines in this war for the truth, and around the world, lies about Israel are being spread, and to fight them, we need your help to grow. So, leave a comment, click the like button, and of course, do not forget to hit that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we'll start today's report with a look at the developments over the weekend in the Gaza Strip. From the intelligence information received by the IDF, it appears that Hamas has returned to restored tunnels and underground infrastructures even in areas where the Israeli army already maneuvered in the past. The IDF estimates that in Gaza City there are large underground systems important for Hamas, some of which were not exposed in the first maneuver in the city about a year and a half ago, and the underground challenge will be even more significant for the forces in the event of another maneuver in that location. Tunnels are a big problem, as was demonstrated last week when 15 terrorists emerged from a tunnel in Khan Yunis to attack nearby IDF troops that were manning a post in the Magen Oz corridor, which basically bisects the city into two. This tunnel was believed to have already been demolished in a previous operation, but apparently Hamas was able to clear the rubble and get the tunnel operational again. An inquiry into the event found that the tunnel near the post was not identified despite suspicious movements in the days before, and the terrorists penetrated directly into buildings where the soldiers were staying. 3 soldiers were wounded in this incident, 1 seriously and 2 lightly. And this also exposed operational gaps and errors in the defense of this post, in addition to rapid response by the forces on the ground. And meanwhile, the IDF carried out intensive strikes in the Hamad neighborhood in Khan Yunis, as well as in the Zeitoun and the Sabra neighborhoods in Gaza City. In addition, strikes were reported in the Jabalia refugee camp in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip as part of the ongoing military pressure on Hamas's centers of control and infrastructure. IDF officials said that at this stage, the aim of this action is to steer the area towards a civilian evacuation and to apply direct pressure on Hamas, while the large and comprehensive maneuver is still expected to take place later. As a reminder, last week, the IDF spokesperson's unit updated that soldiers of the Givati Brigade under Division 162 are already operating in the Jabalia sector and on the outskirts of Gaza City. The forces, it was said, are destroying terror infrastructure above and below the ground, eliminating terrorists, and establishing operational hold on the ground in order to enable expansion of the attacks to additional focal points and to prevent Hamas and the other organizations from returning to their positions. And last Thursday, the Prime Minister arrived for a tour of the Gaza division and received a briefing from the IDF commanders. At its conclusion, he declared, "I came to approve the IDF's plans to take control of Gaza City and to defeat Hamas. In parallel, I gave instructions to begin immediate negotiations for the release of all our hostages and the end of the war on terms acceptable to Israel. We are at a stage of decision. The IDF presented to me and to the Minister of Defense the plans, and I approved them." On that note, security officials have said that the operation, which received the name Gideon Chariots B, is on its way. And according to them, the IDF has begun to move the execution parts of this plan. And at the same time, the IDF has begun a series of preliminary steps to prepare the ground for the large-scale maneuver in the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip and for a broad humanitarian move that includes preparing humanitarian spaces, warning and evacuating the population, and reinforcing tents and food in the areas designated to receive the evacuees. Now, let's go over some of the background information of all of this. Since the return to the fighting in the Southern Command on March 18, the IDF forces have achieved operational control over about 75% of the Gaza Strip within Operation Gideon Chariots. And during the fighting, senior military operatives and more than 2,100 terrorists of Hamas were eliminated. And according to the data published last Wednesday by the IDF spokespersons, these numbers are accurate. And during the operation, 5 divisions operated in parallel: 162, 143, 98, 252, 36, and 99, maneuvering to strategic areas across the Gaza Strip. The forces located and destroyed dozens of terror tunnels, blocked escape routes for terrorists, and eliminated dozens of terrorist squads and senior Hamas operatives. The IDF also paved 2 main axes inside the Gaza Strip: the Morag axis, which bisects the Rafah and the Khan Yunis brigades, and the Magen Oz axis, which bisects the Khan Yunis brigade from east to west. And during the period, about 10,000 terror targets were attacked by hundreds of fighter jets, aircrafts, and vessels from the Air Force and also the Navy. The most central strike was carried out on May 13, 2025, when fighter jets struck in Khan Yunis and eliminated Muhammad Sinwar, the head of Hamas's military wing, Muhammad Sabana, the commander of the Rafah brigade, and Mahdi Koura, the commander of the southern part of the Khan Yunis battalion. In addition to the senior military operatives, senior Hamas government officials, commanders in the General Security, and 6 central commanders in the organization's naval commando, they were all eliminated. Also eliminated were dozens of terrorists who took part in the October 7 massacre and hundreds of additional terrorists and military commanders of the other terrorist organizations in the Gaza Strip. And according to the IDF spokesperson's statement, the achievements in Operation Gideon Chariots created good operational conditions for deepening the pressure on Hamas and harming its remaining capabilities, and they constitute a basis for the IDF's next moves in the Gaza Strip. Some people protested that the strikes have not only harmed Hamas, but also the ordinary residents of the Gaza Strip. However, Gaza residents live in fear not only from IDF strikes, but also from the rule of the murderous terrorist organization Hamas. For instance, sources identified with Hamas reported that the security apparatus executed 4 Gazan citizens on Saturday, one of them a woman, on the claim that they cooperated with Israel. This was done by the so-called Arrow unit within Hamas, the internal security arm which has a long track record of executing ordinary Gazan civilians merely on the strength of an accusation that they are collaborating with Israel. But lately, they have expanded this and are now also executing those that are accused of looting. By that, they mean anyone trying to get something to eat that they didn't buy from the Hamas terrorist organization, which routinely steals humanitarian aid that was sent into the Gaza Strip by the United Nations and other humanitarian organizations and sells it to the population at highly inflated prices. The Arrow unit often records these executions and distributes the recordings to let everyone know how scared and humiliated they should feel in order to maintain their power over the population in Gaza through terror. Now, a moment before we move on to the negotiations for the release of our hostages, I want to invite you to click on the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. I also want to remind you of another group of people who need your help, and that's the ordinary working class people here in Israel. As the war enters what we hope is the final stage, life here in Israel hasn't just been about physical recovery, it's about people trying to rebuild from the ground up. So many hard-working Israelis, including bakers, artisans, small shop owners, had their lives turned upside down. Some were called to reserve duty for hundreds of days every time, some even more than 300 days since this war started, while others had to leave their homes because they were evacuated from a war zone. Many lost months of income almost overnight, and now they are trying to start again, to reopen their businesses, restock shelves, and get back to doing what they love. But it's not easy, and they need help. And that's why Artza exists. Artza partners directly with these small businesses, buying their handmade goods and delivering them in beautiful boxes to homes all around the world. Each box helps real families get back on their feet and puts money in the hands of those working hard to recover with dignity and not with charity. So guys, if you want to be part of that effort, go to www.artsabox.com/TBNIL and use the code TBNIL to get a 10% off of your subscription. Again, that's www.artsabox.com/TBNIL. One box, one family, one step closer to rebuilding. Now, getting back into the news, as previously reported, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel approved the IDF's plans to capture Gaza City while also ordering the opening of immediate negotiations for the release of all the hostages and the end of the war on terms acceptable to Israel. However, no one connected to the Israeli negotiating teams knows whether the Israeli team will leave next week for talks and where they'll be leaving to, whether it's Doha, Qatar, Cairo, in Egypt, or somewhere else. And a senior Israeli said that contacts are being held under the leadership of the United States and the mediators, but there are still no understandings. For instance, in recent days, the concept of a partial deal or a comprehensive deal have come up again and again. Hamas agreed to the framework of a partial deal, which is supposed to lead at its end to an agreement to end the war, while in Israel, the direction was changed and began to insist on a comprehensive deal only, at least according to public statements and briefings around the Prime Minister. And to give some context to all of this, the partial deal rests on a proposal by Egypt and by Qatar, which includes a temporary ceasefire of about 60 days, during which 10 living hostages and the remains of 18 others who have been killed in captivity by Hamas will be released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, including several who are serving life sentences for crimes in Israeli jails. And at the same time, the scope of the humanitarian aid will be increased under the supervision of the United Nations and the Red Cross. This framework does not end the war and is supposed to form a basis for continued negotiations towards a broader deal. Within the partial deal, the United States is supposed to grant guarantees that Israel will not return to fighting. The comprehensive deal states that all the hostages, the living and the fallen, will be released from Hamas captivity at the same time. And beyond that, according to Israel's demands, the war will end with Hamas being disarmed, the Gaza Strip itself being demilitarized, and Israel maintaining security control and a governing body that is being established in the Gaza Strip. That is, neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority will be in charge of Gaza any longer. In return, Israel will stop the war, release a large number of Palestinian prisoners, and allow the entry of equipment and civilian reconstruction to the Gaza Strip in scopes that are not yet clear. And amidst all of this, Hamas has become more flexible regarding the size of the IDF security perimeter and the buffer zone that the IDF created surrounding the Gaza Strip. At first, Hamas wanted this area to be fully vacated by the IDF, but from the terror organization's latest reply to the mediator's proposal, it emerges that they now agree to a perimeter of at least 700 meters in some areas, and this proposal is reportedly accepted to the IDF. The mediators are now pressing Israel to return an answer in order to open a new round of negotiations amidst great frustration in Egypt and Qatar over the fact that Israel is not conveying a positive reply to the proposal to which Hamas agreed, and at the same time is moving forward with a military plan to capture Gaza City. In Egypt, there is also frustration with the American administration, since in Cairo the impression was that the administration is not applying pressure on Israel to agree to this proposal. Thus, all the attempts by Egypt and Qatar to enlist the Americans to apply pressure on Israel are not succeeding at this point. We don't know why. But here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to update on every development in this matter. So keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. Most importantly, do not forget to hit that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time. Now, we are switching our focus to some of the other fronts in this war. And during the past week, the security forces arrested 90 wanted persons across Judea and Samaria as part of the ongoing efforts to thwart terror in the sector. And at the same time, questions and searches continue to locate the terrorists who carried out the attack near the community of Adiel in Binyamin in Judea and Samaria. Soldiers of the Duvdevan unit carried out undercover activity and under the Shin Bet's direction arrested suspects, including a central terrorist from Tubas, together with another terror operative in the heart of Jenin. This was in addition to the arrest of 8 other terror suspects in the area, as well as the confiscation of weapons and large amounts of cash intended for the use by the terrorist organization. All the wanted persons who were arrested and the weapons confiscated by the forces were transferred for further handling by the Shai District Police and the Shin Bet. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani is in Jenin today, the Palestinian city of Jenin, on a special assignment to get a closer look at the terror cells in Judea and Samaria and to understand how the IDF fights them. On tomorrow's episode of Boots on the Ground, he'll give us his full report about what he saw today, so you don't want to miss that. Now, switching our focus to the threat from the Houthis in Yemen. A ballistic missile was fired at Israel on Friday evening and appeared to break up in flight after several attempts to intercept it failed. The Air Force is investigating the incident, including reports that debris landed in the yard of a private home and exploded, leading to speculation that it might have been carrying cluster munitions, such as those that were carried by missiles that were fired by Iran during the 12-day war in June. In any case, the Arrow 3 interceptors did not have enough time to hit the ballistic missile before it broke up in mid-flight, and this forced the Air Force to activate alternative systems, including the Iron Dome, to intercept large debris and fragments before they could hit the ground and cause damage. In any case, the Air Force emphasizes that a missile equipped with a splitting warhead is actually preferable for Israel, since the extent of damage in the case of a missile interception is lower and its sub-munitions do not penetrate armor or the walls of protected spaces like the bomb shelters in Israel. And now, we will move quickly to the Iranian front. More than 91 million residents in Iran have already suffered from about 1 year of a severe shortage of water and electricity, and according to the reports, the worst is about to come. Millions of residents now have no access to clean drinking water after 3 of the largest dams have completely run dry, and most electrical power stations have also stopped operating, leaving citizens to desperately seek alternatives. And over the past weekend, thousands went out into the streets of Iranian cities to protest against the regime's catastrophic failures to manage this situation. Hundreds of schools and universities have already been forced to close, together with government offices, factories, and other facilities. The cellular network is also disconnected for most of the time, and it functions only rarely. However, the regime is not standing still amidst all of these problems. They've got a plan to address these issues, and that plan includes that officials will make one fiery speech after another in which they threaten, guess what? Israel. For instance, the IRGC commander Muhammad Pakpour warned on Saturday that Israel will observe a much harsher response if it takes another military step against Iran. He added that any future attack on us will be answered with a more painful and crushing response than in the 12-day war against Iran. Earlier this week, Yair Safavi, a senior advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and former IRGC commander, said that another military confrontation with Israel or with the United States may occur, and he played down the importance of the current ceasefire, which he said is only another stage in the ongoing war. And meanwhile, 3 sources in the Iranian regime told Reuters last week that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei decided to support a return to negotiations with the United States of America on the nuclear issue. And according to the sources, Khamenei has concluded that negotiations are the only way to avoid a military confrontation, which could lead to the fall of this regime in Iran. In addition, as part of the war preparations in Iran, the British Telegraph reported last week that after about 30 nuclear scientists were eliminated during Operation Rising Lion, Iran moved those who remained to hiding locations. Israeli experts told the Telegraph that a new generation of Iranian nuclear scientists is expected to step in the shoes of those who were terminated, but they define them as dead men walking, despite the increased security around them, which includes safe houses and round-the-clock guards. And in a related story, while tens of millions of Iran's residents suffer from the lack of electricity and the shortage of drinking water and water for agricultural needs, in the IRGC, the army, and the police, they don't have to seem to have any problems with anything, and they do not lack water or electricity. For now, their commanders do not limit consumption of water or electricity, but even experts connected to the regime admit that this might soon change. And on that note, President Masoud Pezeshkian recently admitted that the deterioration in the supply of electricity and water is the result of mismanagement and bribes that are paid to the wrong managers. He added that there is hardly a single government workplace that is not tainted with corruption and with bribery. This is an extraordinary statement by the president of Iran, and it's been on my heart lately to pray for Israel's enemies, and I want to ask you guys to pray for President Pezeshkian, who has made the very brave decision to tell the truth about some of the things that this regime is doing to its people. So you can't have a functional society if the government lies to cover up its mistakes instead of learning from them and fixing the problems. Iran's people deserve better than to have a government which tries to conceal the truth while things just keep getting worse for everyone. So, pray for President Pezeshkian to have godly wisdom and also to start loving the Jewish people instead of hating Israel. Okay? God can make that happen. If the situation continues, experts in Tehran who prefer not to be named warn that a harsh year of drought is expected. Such a situation will almost certainly prompt millions to protests in the streets of Iran, which, of course, will lead to violence. If the past is any indication, hundreds will be arrested, questioned, and sent to prisons. This regime does not care about the things that they do to the people of Iran. They do not care if the people are unhappy with the situation. They want to use power to control their own population. And to our viewers in Iran, I say, you are not alone. We are praying for you, and we hope for a day when we will all be free from this horrible regime and we can celebrate a better future together. I want to visit Tehran myself. And guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to stand on the front, reporting about everything that's happening from Israel so that you will know the truth. And now, before we move on to our next report on Israel's northern sector, please subscribe to TBN Israel YouTube channel so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we are switching our focus to the northern arena. The political negotiations around the future of the situation in southern Lebanon continue to run into a dead end. Sources in Lebanon said that meetings held in recent days between Hezbollah representatives and envoys of Lebanon's president Nawaf Salam ended with no progress. And according to the reports, the organization made clear that any step to disarm it would lead to direct confrontation. In other words, if the Lebanese National Army tries to take away Hezbollah's guns, Hezbollah plans to give them the bullets instead. Hezbollah informed the president and the army commander that it is not willing to accept even a symbolic step regarding limiting the weapons, and emphasized that its participation in the discussions of the new government does not mean a reduction of the escalation in the streets. Thus, the organization signals that it intends to preserve its military power despite political and international pressure. And at the same time, Lebanon's Al Jadid channel reported that Israel rejected the proposal of the American envoy Tom Barak, which was presented this week in a meeting with the Minister for Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer in Paris. And according to the report, Israel expressed a principled willingness for a gradual halt to anti-terrorism operations and a withdrawal from several points in southern Lebanon and the ending of the prisoners issue, but rejected other key conditions, which effectively cancels the entire outline. Israel's counter-proposal includes establishing a buffer zone along the border, as the villages destroyed near the border would remain without residents and would become an industrial zone that would separate the Lebanese villages from the Israeli territory. Political elements in Lebanon claimed that this is a disguise for a demand for direct Israeli control, but other political sources denied this. And at the same time, diplomatic sources confirmed that Barak asked Israel to take steps of limited withdrawal in order to encourage the Lebanese government to begin collecting the weapons by virtue of its responsibility. It is important to point out that the internal crisis in Lebanon is occurring against an unprecedented, difficult situation for Hezbollah. The organization suffers from a prolonged economic crisis that began even before this war, from vast destruction in the Shia villages in the south and in the Bekaa Valley due to its involvement in this war, and from the elimination of the organization's Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah alongside most of its leadership and thousands of fighters. Since February, Lebanon has had a government led by President Nawaf Salam and recognized by the international community. Hezbollah and its ally, the Amal movement, have lost their ability to control the parliament by using its voting bloc to veto decisions and force new elections. And amidst all of this, the current government is advancing an initiative to collect the weapons from all the militias in the countries, including Hezbollah, an initiative that raises the level of political and security tensions across all of Lebanon. And recently, Dr. Yaron Friedman, an expert on Syria and Lebanon, said in a column that is published by the Israeli news portal Ma'ariv that Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, is on the way to a new civil war because of all these factors. Other experts in Israel and across the Middle East have voiced similar fears in recent weeks. And guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in this issue. So guys, keep spreading the truth, and now I want to pay respects to the heroes of Israel who fell in defense of the state of Israel. It is my sad duty, guys, to conclude today's report by paying last respects to a hero who fell in the defense of the people and the land of Israel on Saturday. Lieutenant Uri Gerlitz, 20 years of age, from Meitar. He's a platoon commander in the Shimshon Battalion 92 of the Kfir Brigade Infantry, and he lost his life in an operational accident in which an IDF charge exploded in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip. The charge was intended to demolish a building in Khan Yunis that Hamas was using as a base of operation, and the IDF is now investigating whether it was a technical malfunction or a human error that caused the charge to explode ahead of time. And guys, I want to call on all of you to continue and pray for the IDF soldiers that are risking their lives in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza Strip, Judea and Samaria. I also want to call on you to pray for our team that went into Syria last week, and also now Mati is in Jenin, in Judea and Samaria, to show you what truly is happening on the ground. Let's pray for peace in this region. Let's pray for all the innocent lives that are affected by these terrorist regimes. Let's continue to pray for God's peace, the peace of Jerusalem.